Hello, everyone. My name is Bill Spencer. I am part of the team that is supporting various parts of the Microsoft field in engaging the strategic customers in the various levels of U.S. government at the federal, state, and local level. My colleagues Rima Reyes and Mornay Pretorius are also supporting various customers. And I'm going through a set of slides to talk about how best to position and sell Microsoft Teams for customers required to use the special government clouds, GCC, GCC High, and DoD. So thank you very much for joining. There is a place for adding questions, and I'd like you to ask any questions as we go along. Occasionally I'll flip over and try to answer questions in real time, and I'll leave time at the end. But I have a fair amount of slides to go through, which I'll go through relatively quickly because I think the slides are fairly self-evident. And also I want to sort of land the key messages that are different between selling Teams in the commercial cloud and selling Teams in the special government clouds. So, Office 365 is really designed to solve the needs of organizations moving towards the modern workplace. And Teams is at the heart of that. So if you want to sell Microsoft 365 or Office 365, Teams is really the best tool available today to do that. And as we go through this, you'll see that Teams really supports all of these key points: unlocking creativity, enabling better teamwork, better integration across Office 365. It's really the hub for teamwork in Office 365, and the best security available in the collaboration space. Now, many people have a fundamental question of why Teams, because they say, well, I have Outlook, I have SharePoint, why do I need Teams? I have Skype for Business, why do I need Teams? And you'll notice this slide is slightly different. I've replaced Yammer with SharePoint here because Yammer isn't available in the special government clouds. But it makes the same point. One of the customers I'm working with, they're so focused on SharePoint, they've been working on it for a few years, they're just delivering it, and they find Teams is just sort of muddying up the water. But when I drilled into how they were using SharePoint, it was clear that they were using SharePoint as a publishing model where each department or project team in the organization would have a very well curated SharePoint site, and there would be a set of information that would be available to the rest of the organization. And that is not what Teams is for. So that really is the outer loop. It's the way of publishing for people to discover and explore on their own. And where Teams is really involved is producing the content behind that site. It's where smaller teams get together to get their work done. And a key aspect of this is, SharePoint can scale to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people within an organization accessing information. But Teams is limited to 2,500 within a team. Now we're going to bump that up at some point within GCC, but it will never be the same scalability that SharePoint will have. So in order to get work done, you almost by nature have a smaller team working on a particular set of documents or projects, and then SharePoint can be used to publish that. In fact, what I like to think of this as not just sort of an inner and outer loop, but actually a virtuous cycle where, say I discover something of interest on SharePoint, say about another part of the Microsoft organization. I work in the Office 365 group. I'm very interested in HoloLens. I do some research and find that there's interesting documents about HoloLens, and I could discover those on SharePoint, at which point I would email the authors and we would set up a meeting, all of that happening in Outlook. And then once we've established a small project team to investigate perhaps the integration between Teams and HoloLens, then we would be on the inner loop. It's a known project, a known team. We'd get our work done. And when we want to go out and tell the organization, the rest of Microsoft, about what we've done, then we would use SharePoint and perhaps Outlook to do that. So that's why I view, this as a virtuous cycle, not just an inner and outer loop. But it talks to the importance of teams. Why teams? One supporting data point is that Teams is the fastest growing business app in Microsoft history. There's over 1,700 government organizations using Teams within the government community cloud. And that includes 13 federal agencies, 87 state agencies, over 340 county and over 340 cities are already using Teams in GCC. But I think, importantly, and these are true of both commercial and the government clouds, that Teams delivers significant time savings. So in my case, and I always like to personalize this, I used to spend 4 hours a day in Outlook, and now I spend 2 hours a day in Outlook. So I've cut that time in half. I spend 1 hour in Teams getting more work done than I used to be getting done in the other 2 hours in Outlook. So I save at least an hour. And this is unfortunately just anecdotal largely at this point, but if you talk to so many users of Teams in government agencies, commercial agencies, and here at Microsoft, almost all of them will tell you of the significant time savings that Teams delivers. And that time savings comes in a couple different ways. Primarily because you can find information yourself. You don't have to ask people. So it's just a better way of organizing information. Another important aspect from a government perspective is Teams is the only group chat that supports the FedRAMP requirements. So, the great thing is in a sense we have no competition from Slack or WhatsApp and others. Those tools are just not secure enough. But one of the challenges is that security comes at a price, and I make the analogy that you can have a Humvee or you can have a minivan. Both are great for teams of people to get around, but the challenge is that Humvees are just fundamentally different, a different platform, and in the same way, the GCC platform is more secure. It's a more secure platform. But you're not going to get, just to sort of strain the analogy, all of, the cup holders, the sky, the moon roof, the styling and comfort that you might get in a minivan. So not all of the features that are available in the commercial version of Teams are available in the government community cloud. But I've been on Teams since the very beginning, and I can tell you there were millions of commercial users. In fact, Teams, with the feature set that's currently available in GCC, Teams was still the fastest growing business app in Microsoft history. So it's a very compelling set of features that are available today in GCC. But so often I hear from IT professionals, they're looking over their shoulder or looking over the fence, if you will, to the grass being greener on the commercial side and saying, well, why don't we have Stream? Why don't we have this? Why don't we have that? And respectfully, we're working on getting as many of those into GCC as quickly as possible. We value our GCC customers, in a sense, more highly because, believe me, we're making a lot less money in the government clouds than we're making on the commercial clouds. So, Microsoft is eager to meet the needs of our government customers, and we've demonstrated that with really unique support for government customers, but not all the features are there yet. But this is a perfect time to start piloting and deploying Teams around the core collaboration features, and those features are really the source of the time savings I was talking about. So the primary benefits, the features that deliver the primary benefits of Teams are available in GCC today, and you should not feel underconfident. You should feel confident, rather, going and selling Teams today, because it really is a compelling productivity benefit for our customers. And that the big source of that is that it automatically organizes information so that each channel or chat room becomes a single source of truth for whatever project or topic that a team is collaborating on. It's just more organic, it's more natural to think, who are the group of people I'm working with, and what are the things that we're working on, and to find all of the relevant conversation and information about those projects in those in the various channels and chat rooms. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the demo. And then what I also think is very important for our government customers is that Teams offers group memory. So it automatically retains the expertise in the context for decisions, for document creation, for things that happened in the past. And this is so important because many agencies are facing what I call sort of a retirement cliff. It's probably a better word that you know for that. But in the state of Illinois, for example, over 50% of the government employees are able to retire in the next 2 years. So they're seeing the potential for many people leaving the state, or many people leaving state government, and when they do, that expertise is going to be walking out the door. Now's the time to implement Teams in order to capture that expertise, and chances are the new employees that they'll be retaking the place of the retirees will be more prone or more comfortable with a group chat metaphor. And this slide is one worth talking about to that point. The previous slides I showed, I would only show the inner and outer loop of all the slides I've showed, and then this slide is another useful slide to talk about the teamwork trends in government, and that is diverse generations working together, and Teams is very well suited to meet the needs. It's very easy to use. Almost anyone who has a smartphone is very comfortable using the group chat applications on those phones, and Teams, even in the GCC space, brings so many of the consumer-friendly features of group chat that many people feel very comfortable using it from the get-go. There's a greater orientation towards collaboration, and this is in and outside of the organization, and Teams offers a great ability in GCC, less so in GCC High and DoD for security reasons, but it offers a great opportunity for collaborating across agencies and across organizations. And then the mobile commuting, the telecommuting or telework scenarios. So much today is mobile work, and Teams, because of its cross-platform support, offers excellent support on Windows, Mac, web, as well as on iOS, both iPad and iPhone, and then on Android devices. So it's a great platform for working. Really, you can collaborate, anywhere you are that has an interconnection at any time with anyone that your organization has enabled you. So this is also a very emphasis on security. So this is another slide I'd use with customers, just talking about Microsoft's investment in supporting our government customers, and the fact that we have secure and redundant data centers dedicated to the government support. And then here's the time frame in which we've released GCC, GCC High, and DoD. And then this is another slide I like to use with customers, and this is really where GCC adoption tends to happen. Where's Teams being adopted, and it tends to be in areas where there is a project focus. So I like to say, if you've got information workers who spend half their day on half a dozen different projects, they will really benefit from Teams because it's easier to switch between tasks and to manage your time so that you are only putting in enough time relevant to your role in that project team. I'm on so many different projects. In some I'm leading, but they might be in different phases. I might be waiting for someone else to deliver on something. I might not be critical path, but I might be leading the project. I'm going to be very involved in that, and I can by going to that particular team, to that particular channel, I can spend my time appropriately staying on top of that. But there's many other projects, in my case probably a dozen or more projects, in which I'm an occasional participant. And for those, I don't want to have to process all that email in my inbox. In the problem with Outlook, I love Outlook. I was on the original Outlook team, but you have to process all of those mails. Whereas in Teams, you can go and very quickly get up to speed on where the project is, making sure there's no fires, nothing for you to engage on, and then switch back to the core projects that you own. That's a lot easier in Teams. So that's where a lot of the time savings comes from. And of course, if you have to search across projects in which you may not really even be involved, but you have access because it's appropriate to your organization, you can quickly search and find that information in Teams. So that's really where if you're involved in a lot of different things, Teams is a real time saver. The other area where the other factor driving early adoption of Teams is where there is a project team separated either geographically or by shift or time zone. And the greater the geographic or the greater the time zone shift, the better, because in a sense, Teams is designed to create a virtual workspace, a virtual conference room where a project team can get together when they want and get the work done around a particular project or topic. Well, the need for that virtual workspace increases when it's less it's less feasible to get the whole team together in the physical world. So that's where another factor of Teams early adoption. And then where customers are using WhatsApp or Messenger or Slack, often in their personal life, but often we're replacing it in the work environment. There's a state prison organization where they were using WhatsApp for the prison guards to coordinate on schedules. Well, imagine when a prison guard retires, leaves the agency, or even worse, is fired. They are still on all of these informal groups that were created in these consumer apps, and that actually becomes a security risk when they have access to schedule information. So it's just an example of where these tools really aren't appropriate, but the good news is that they have built a knowledge base where it's very easy for these employees to transition or to additionally adopt Teams because formerly in their work life they were using these consumer tools inappropriately, but often in their personal life it's very easy for them to understand how Teams works because it follows on that. Now, these next few slides I'm really going to skip over quickly, but these are examples based on a survey I ran of how Teams is being adopted and used in various agencies, in the IT departments. Broader usages like cross-agency collaboration, live site or emergency response is very popular, project management, new employee orientation. So you can see these are good examples, and typically after I do a demo of Teams, I will go through some of these, I believe, self-explanatory scenarios, and light bulbs go off with the government customers I'm presenting to, and they realize how they can adopt Teams, in the short run. So I'm going to go quickly through a demo, and before I do that, I'm just going to switch over and see if I have some questions here. Not seeing any questions, I'm going to keep going. So a key thing on the demo is you have to deliver it in GCC. The state of Hawaii, with a little bit of emotion in their voice, basically told the account team, we do not want your sales folks showing Teams in any environment other than GCC. It's causing too many problems for IT to answer questions. And that was a good sort of shot over the bow for us to sort of realize, we really have to demo in the GCC environment. And this is coming very soon to demos.microsoft.com, where there will be a full-blown demo. Now, my colleague Rima Reyes, who's really the primary contact for all things special government clouds for Teams, she will be going through an in-depth demo. I'm going to give you a very quick demo in Teams. We've talked about the pitch here. I've got this slide that I used earlier, but this one's not bad as well. But I replaced where it said global with mobile. Global does make sense, but I think mobile probably covers it. This slide is very important. It's kind of the 4C slide: communicate, collaborate, customize, and confidence. A key point on this slide, and this is why you should use this one, is you'll notice I've removed third party, which is what we talk about in commercial. Now you can still do a lot of customization, and there's a lot coming in this space, but we don't have third-party apps in GCC, and that's primarily because the third parties aren't supporting it. So we're trying to come up with something for our government agencies to do in terms of customization. But the customization available within Office 365 is still vast and extremely useful for government agencies. In fact, it's really the majority in commercial. I mean, just to give you a percentage, I would guess 95% of all the customization that happens in commercial is using the features that are available today in GCC. And so often, these IT pros will beat us up about not having Trello or not having, maybe the development environment yet available in Teams for GCC. And yet, they're coming off of, Exchange 2010, Skype for Business on-prem server, 2013, and they're beating us up about not having the latest features that in many cases were released in the last 6 months on the commercial side. And I understand that and respect that, but these should not be blockers for the evaluation and even the broad deployment of Teams and GCC. And that's really this work with confidence point, which is, GCC support is unique to Teams. We also support GDPR. That is unique, amazingly. FERPA, HIPAA, a broad set of ISO and SOC standards, and those audits are available. So in terms of the demo, let me just switch over here, and again, I encourage you to ask any questions as I'm doing this. So I want to point out this is not the demo environment that will be available soon, or is currently available based on when you listen to this on demos.microsoft.com. However, I just wanted to point out the key things that you talk about. So first of all, I'm in the GCC environment. Importantly, you can tell that by clicking on the tabs, and you have this great set of Microsoft applications. Planner is a very welcome addition. I usually demo Planner. I usually demo Power BI as I do this, because those are such great experiences. And what I typically do is show how to customize a channel using the various documents that are available. And I will upload those files, and then I will add them as a tab across the top. And I will talk about how you can use these tabs as places for collaboration by starting a conversation. And I always point out the importance of @mentions. And then I talk about how the @mentions lead to notifications here and activity, and are fundamental to time savings, because the person who's posting the message has the obligation, really the burden is on them, to bring attention to their particular post. The rest of the messages in Teams are really on an FYI basis, but there is an expectation that I've gone through and read my activity, and I've found all those places where I've been mentioned, and I've followed up on them, and I talk about how when I'm on the receiving end of an mention, I see this nice red badge, and if I'm interested in following up, often on my mobile device, I'm going through my activity app, and then I will bookmark or save items that I would like to come back to later. Going through all the various items in activity, I can look for all those places where people have replied to messages that I was involved in. I'll show how to do some of the interactivity to give people thumbs up. Ideally, you do this with a group of people where you would demo the interactivity in Teams and show how to get things done. By the way, I would minimize the use of the fun features simply because sometimes those don't go over as well in the government space as they do in commercial. I've gotten some feedback on that, so I'd limit that, but I would still make sure to show them, make sure that people know they're aware, because they really do help build team morale. And I'll spend some time showing chat and how chats, group chats can be renamed, and often use the example of LT for training or something along those lines, and then emphasize that these can be pinned so that you can set project teams to sort of a higher priority, even if they are just in group chat. And I'll always show the saved items, my bookmarks. These are the ones I just talked about earlier. And my process each day is to go through chat, clear my activity, bookmark items when I get back. Often I'll do that commuting on my mobile device or maybe between meetings during the day. And then I'll go through and address these messages. Maybe they require a full keyboard, maybe they require a personal conversation. And there's a real satisfaction to when I've been able to clear my bookmarks, and I feel then I can really start driving my day. But I think the overall flow is to show the customization, the creation and customization of a channel, and to in some cases you can do the complete authoring of a document right within Teams, which is great to show co-authoring, as well as how Teams can be sort of the center of your work experience. And I emphasize the need for each channel, ideally, to have a place to save decisions, a place to save metrics, or sort of a dashboard, and a place to cover tasks. Actually, this is probably a better example of tasks. Let me rename this one as tasks. Planner is a great way of doing task lists as well. In the interest of time, I won't go through a planner demo, but I really encourage you to add planner. And a place to cover decisions. And if each channel has that, you really can have a meeting driven by just going through the tabs of a channel and discussing them in detail, capturing the notes, capturing the action items, and then ending the conversation with everyone on the same page. And anyone who wasn't able to attend that particular meeting, all the information is there for them to follow up on later. And in the sort of retirement cliff scenario, we've captured the context. We've captured a lot more information than you're going to see in a pure sort of SharePoint view of who asked for this particular document, who created it, who was part of the review process, the best practices, the whole decision-making process, that is captured here in the Conversations tab in Teams, and it really makes for a great way of capturing the expertise and context of previous members of the team. So those are the key points I emphasize. I typically don't spend a lot of time on meetings and calling, just because those feature sets aren't as mature. I talk a little bit about files because I think it's important for people to realize that in chat, the files are stored in OneDrive for Business, and in Teams, the files are saved in SharePoint, in a SharePoint share. And you can easily get to that SharePoint share right here by clicking Open in SharePoint. And each of the channels in Teams has a folder in SharePoint. In OneDrive, all the chat files that I have shared with others are stored in this folder, the Microsoft Team chat files, and these files are individually shared with the members of the chats, either the one-on-one chats or the group chats. I see there's a couple questions coming in, so I'm just going to switch over and see here. With things like GIFs, I always point to the changeover in workforce. GIFs are a major part of communication. That's an excellent point, Nash. That's a good speaking point. Jeff, so GIFs are of increasing importance and often, again, help build team morale. When you have to say bad news or just no in Teams, sometimes the GIFs can kind of lighten that message, and that's important when you're saying no in a more public forum than you might in a limited email. Jeff says, I like showing how you can extend the SharePoint sites that's create along new teams where you can add SharePoint pages. Yeah, that's excellent. So yes, you can extend the SharePoint sites that's created in a new team with SharePoint pages and SharePoint lists. And Jeff, that's worth my mentioning to Rima. So she's going to do a fuller demo, and I'll make sure that she does that. And the Power BI tab is super important because Teams, it really shines when you can pull together all the information about a particular topic in one place. So you can have metrics like the budget. You can have this conversation on the side, and that's important because you don't have to drill in and edit the document. The conversation can all be unified here in the Conversation tab. You can have richer information such as this project timeline, and people can comment on that appropriately. You can bring in existing SharePoint Online sites and allow people to have access to the older files that might have been stored in a separate SharePoint site, and then any documents that you've attached to the conversation thread will be saved here in the Files tab, and it helps for migration over time. The nice thing here is, of course, I have access to all the previous metadata, so it's not an instance of losing out because I've moved to Teams. That information is still available to me. So all good points, and I'm going to keep going just in the interest of time. Often after I've done the demo, the first question the typically IT pros in the room will be asking is about how do I prevent sprawl. So I don't know what happened when. Maybe it was originally in Active Directory or Exchange distribution lists. Maybe it was in some earlier instances of SharePoint, but it just seems to be very top of mind for the IT pros I've met in the government space to be worried about sprawl and really wanting to lock teams down. And I'll say a couple things. One is, teams can be as tightly managed as the IT pros want. So you can limit who can create a team to just a small set in IT. You can create a forms process in SharePoint or in Flow for people to ask and justify a team. We have third parties like AvePoint, which have services for improved governance in teams. But I'll just say that if you can encourage people to have as minimal setup as possible, that would be great. I mean, the vast majority of commercial tenants follow Model A, where anyone can create a team and there's no limitations on it. In the sort of the Model B world, it's minimal controls, and the biggest one at Microsoft is the ability to set an expiration time on an Office 365 group. And over 40% of the teams created are not renewed at the 6-month expiration point. So that's really the primary one. We also have certain restrictions, we call them stop words, for group names. So for example, within Microsoft, you can't create a team using Satya Nadella's name. You have the option of adding prefixes and suffixes on group names. We don't use this at Microsoft, but many agencies find this useful. And in terms of approved creators, Microsoft's quite broad. All of the full-time employees can create teams at Microsoft. Contractors can't. But in many organizations, they want approved creators to be a much more narrow group. So perhaps a certain level of management and organization. I like that because it allows teams to adapt pretty quickly. I can, ask any sort of director level person and say within an agency, and I can get a team created. I don't have to go to IT. The interesting challenge with the admin-led model is really, what does the person in IT know about the creation of a team? How do they even have the information necessary to approve it? That, I think, is really kind of a challenge. This model does lend to certain benefits, like you can always have 2 team owners, for example. But I think that it leads to more problems than it solves. And generally, the use of teams in the sort of Model C world is generally very limited. We'll see 2 organizations, say in the commercial space, in the same industry, very similar dynamics. Maybe they're even competing with each other, and one will have a flourishing Teams usage and the other won't. And when we drill in, we find that where Teams is not being used, it's just this Model C has created too many barriers to entry. So after the governance conversation, or maybe sometimes before, maybe even during the demo, people will look for something that's missing that they know exists in commercial, and they'll say, where's Stream, or where's Outlook, or who knows? They'll come up with something where's Trello, and why isn't it available in GCC? And it's almost kind of a sport. I can see why, in their position, that might be something they almost have to say. But I like these slides because what it talks about is how many of the features are available today. And you can see their state in various higher clouds. These are Rima's slides, and if you have a question about these, I would encourage you to talk to Rima about them. And all these slides will be made available. There's a few challenges in various groups, and she really knows the answers on most of these. I will say I don't believe website is going to make first quarter, as we're almost at the end of the first quarter, but it's coming very soon. Planner, this isn't accurate. Planner is available right now, as you saw from the demo. But people are working on all of these to get them available as quickly as possible. Many of the features that are the primary productivity drivers are available today in GCC, but these slides go through the particular details. And I have sort of 2 cuts at these in terms of most asked and but you could choose the way you want to present those. Only choose one of those versions. Here is a customer-ready slide about additional information and where you can get it. And I always try to drive to a pilot, and that's really where I want to end the conversation. And in terms of the pilot, I want to have a pilot in IT. That's kind of inevitable. In fact, the most common pilot of Teams is in IT, and it's about the deployment or evaluation of Teams. So they use Teams in order to evaluate or deploy Teams. But I always try to get something outside of IT. And I would say in general, the key to success, the key to organic growth of teams within an organization, and when I say organic growth of teams, this is also driving all of the usage of Office 365 or significant usage of Office 365 once you get beyond the basic Exchange Online usage. Those other workloads are really driven by folks outside of IT, project teams, using Teams themselves to get their work done. And it pulls in all the other Office 365 workloads. So it's so important to get past IT, and I always make it a requirement. If I'm going to support a pilot in IT, I'm going to support one or more pilots outside of IT, and really the more the better. And then part of the way that I help enforce that is I'll offer to do an onboarding session to orient people on Teams, and I'll require that at least 200 people are invited to that session. So typically that gets us outside of IT, and I try to get entire project teams involved. And I've got those recordings, and I'll make those available in the follow-up to this presentation. So we've talked about delivering the sales pitch in terms of the requirements. It's important that Exchange Online, SharePoint are available. Those are primary. Teams will actually fail gracefully if OneDrive is not available, but they won't be able to share files in the chat, which is a very important scenario. And I can't really emphasize this enough. Lead with core chat and collaboration. Many of these conversations are driven by the fact that SharePoint Online at some point in the future will eventually be going away, but I really feel that the meetings and particularly voice conversations are secondary to getting the core collaboration scenarios for teams going in an organization. I mean, in some sense, you should have chat and collaboration going for 6 or more months before you get going on these higher workloads. Now, ideally, you leave on the meetings or even the calling apps. You can disable those. I always say to customers, you may want to disable those if you have questions about them. But I think it's important that we lead with core collab, and that it's developing the coalition of the willing within a given agency instead of forcing anything. So you want very broad organic adoption of Teams before you start forcing a change on the meeting side, or particularly forcing a change on the voice side. So I would sort of say that after a 6-month period, then we can start talking about meetings and voice and other requirements. Formatting of this slide isn't great, but Exchange should be deployed first or in parallel with Teams. Teams has strong dependencies on Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, less extent OneDrive. This is sort of a resummary of the tabs. Part of the great things about Office 365 groups is you can set up classification, and that can drive the governance around how documents are managed, whether guests can be added to a team. That can be driven on classification. Expiration policy I talked about, very important in terms of managing the sprawl that so many IT pros are worried about. And it's critical that this is emphasized and tested before they go through the process of locking everything down, because they'll probably find the expiration policy alone is sufficient to reduce sprawl. And this is just a slide of how that looks in terms of when something is going to expire. And this is a detailed slide on the options for various types of groups governance. And this sort of builds on my earlier point: drive the core collab first, and delay to the extent possible conversations around Skype for Business, online migration. Skype for Business on-prem, it's not necessary. I mean, I understand there's a revenue model around it, but really the fastest way for you to get them to upsell to E5 and others is not to start with that conversation, but to get the users using Teams, finding the benefit in it, those who want to use it adopting it, and build a lot of momentum in the organization. And then these conversations around meeting and voice are a lot easier. And these slides are from the general commerce approach, commercial Teams approach to selling Teams within the organization. I think they're useful as sort of how you can think about it, but to me, selling the time-saving and productivity benefits of Teams is first and foremost. Then this almost guides where in the organization you can get those pilots started outside of IT. And here's some good examples of it. I think almost more relevant. These are nice slides to share with the customers, but almost more relevant are the slides I had earlier based on where we're seeing early adoption of Teams in GCC. And this is the adoption framework, which is, I think, very helpful. Executive sponsorship is very important, and in creating a process where you have a set of milestones or checkpoints with the executive sponsor, because where I'm seeing Teams bogged down is IT views it as one of many priorities. They kind of get started. The pilot stalls in IT, and there's not really a driving function to take it outside of IT. Maybe early on in IT, they're looking at it as a Slack alternative or a Slack replacement, and once their needs are satisfied, they're not going to solve the broader problem. Or maybe there's a particular niche scenario like emergency response. So Teams is used when there's an emergency, but it's not really used for getting day-to-day work done. Well, we like any usage of Teams, but it's important with an executive sponsor to drive the sort of broader productivity benefits of Teams, the more advanced use of Office 365, the ability for people to collaborate no matter where they are on any mobile device. That is what you want to get the executive sponsor fired up about. Okay, and here's additional resources, and I'll let you come to those. I'm going to look to see if there's any additional questions. Seeing none, I'm going to finish out the slides, but if you've got any more questions, feel free to chime in with them. And I would say, 80% of the tools that are available for selling Teams in commercial are available and useful for selling Teams in GCC, but always look for the emphasis on third-party apps. Careful there. Please don't use commercial Teams to demo, because inevitably you're going to show a third-party integration, or maybe OneNote that's not yet available in GCC. And but all these various information sources are great. The Skype to Teams transition, again, that shouldn't be how you lead, but this is very useful context because it often comes up, and it's important to have that information. My colleague Rima has weekly calls on Friday mornings to cover anything to do with Teams in GCC and GCC High and DoD. So I really encourage you to participate in those. I'm going to switch over and see what the question is. Which GCC customers is using Teams? Is there a list that exists somewhere? Yes, there is a list, and I actually have pretty easy access to one right here. See if I can pop this out so it stands out a little bit more. Let me choose only REMA's accounts. We got a few from Canada here. But there is great usage of Teams. California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, World Bank Group, New York State Office of Information, Inter-American Development Bank, Allegheny County, United Nations, UMC Health, American Red Cross, U.S. Customs and Borders is big. And you can see the usage here is in the thousands. We don't have yet, and I wouldn't share this with customers, we don't have yet any in the tens of thousands, but actually some of these, like border security, is just about to break out. That could be very big. County of Los Angeles is promising to be very big. New York State Office Information Technology. I would expect these to be in the tens of thousands within the next 3 months, which I don't know when you're watching this, but that'll be before the end of fiscal year 2019 is over. So we're seeing very significant growth. You can see that this is growing 36% in the past month. So 36% growth in a month is great, and based on that kind of growth, we're going to see very healthy numbers before the end of the fiscal year. So I'm going to leave the presentation off here. I'll just pause one more time. Any other additional questions before I go? If you have questions, again, my colleague Rima has weekly calls, and I'm available for calls. I prefer to get questions in Teams, and I also have a set of Rima and I give monthly webinars for GCC users that are open to any, could be at the decision maker level, like a CIO level. It could be at the IT professional level, or we have many end users, and we've given dozens of these GCC onboarding sessions, and we have recordings of them, and they've proved to be very useful in helping people understand the benefits of Teams. And they're done in the GCC environment, so we're not showing features that will cause heartburn for our friends in IT. And I'm willing to give those to any organization in GCC that can invite 200 people to a given session. So I'm happy to do a custom session for those agencies. So you should be confident in going out and selling Teams in GCC today. And you should know that there's resources available from Rima Reyes, from Morne Pretorius, and myself to support you in those efforts. And I'm just going to answer this last question. Let go. Are there GCC High webinars as well? There will be, Alan. Rima has clearances for GCC High. Morne and myself do not, but I'm confident that Rima can help with a GCC High webinar. It may make sense for that to be done on a per agency basis. So there's the open webinars, and then there are custom sessions. I think GCC High and DoD would be more on the custom side, and I know Rima has done both of those on custom basis. I don't know if we're ever going to have a GCC High open webinar. I'd leave that up to Rima, but I kind of doubt it, given our limitations on restricting who can attend. But we want to support you in any of the special government clouds. We really appreciate you participating in today's overview, and look forward to working with you. So sell Teams, and let's get Microsoft 365 broadly adopted across the various government agencies. Thank you all very much.